Hey folks, this episode of the Majority Report is brought to you by one of our favorite sponsors, if not our favorite, Sunset Lake CBD. Use code LEFTISBEST for 20% off. We've told you all about Sunset Lake CBD and their great products. I mean, I literally have the lotion right here, unscented, so I don't upset Sam's sensitive nose here in the office. At home, I have my own scented version of this lotion. It is great, especially in the wintertime. I need it right here on my desk. I also have these gummies right here on my desk, which I sometimes will have one right before I take my walk home. And it's a very, very nice way to relax and unwind after a show where we talk about things like, mass starvation and mass deportations and stuff like that. It's also great because Sunset Lake is a company that you can feel proud about supporting. Sunset Lake pays its workers a minimum wage of $22 an hour. A majority of the business is owned by folks that actually work there, so it's in part employee owned. Sunset Lake is a political company that you can feel good about supporting. It has donated over $100,000 to causes like criminal justice reform, food insecurity, refugee relief, worker solidarity, strike funds, and more. Sunset Lake also uses sustainable farming practices, like techniques that use cover cropping, low-till, organic fertilizer, and more. No pesticides ever, integrated pest management, and more. It's really good quality and also a company that you can feel good about supporting. You can get the gummies like I have. I also have the sleep gummies at home, the focus ones. You can get the gummies with a little THC in them, as Sam would say, and even grinded up keef, whatever you need to complement some of maybe your other herbal indulgences. Sunset Lake CBD is the best. I say this every time, but when I started getting into CBD, you get kind of scammed by a lot of junk in stores and places that aren't that high quality. This is not that. So if you go to sunsetlakecbd.com and use code LEFTISBEST, you get 20% off. sunsetlakecbd.com. Use code LEFTISBEST for 20% off. And now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, August 22nd, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Derek Davison and Eleanor Janega of American Prestige and the new podcast Welcome to the Crusades will both be joining us to recap this week in news. Also on the program, Global Food Monitor IPC officially declares a famine in Gaza, warning that the, quote, worst case scenario is unfolding with 500,000 people already experiencing famine. Israel's defense minister says Israel will destroy all of Gaza City. Quote, the gates of hell will open. What could he mean by that?
It's a marginal figure. It doesn't represent all of Israel.
Yeah. Russia strikes a U.S. factory in Ukraine overnight. The FBI raids John Bolton's home and office, an escalation of Trump's efforts to prosecute his critics, no matter how much we may find them loathsome. The White House will review 55 million U.S. visa holders for violations, which experts say is a wildly inflated figure, including tens of millions of people not currently in the U.S. A federal judge says Alligator Alcatraz must cease construction, halting its operations effectively and giving the government 60 days to dismantle it, siding with the indigenous groups that brought environmental objections. Some rare good news. Less so here. The Supreme Court 5-4 overturns a lower court decision, allowing the NIH to terminate nearly $800 million in federal grants related to diversity. Newsom officially signed legislation putting California's redrawn map on the ballot in November. In Minneapolis, the not-so-democratic Farmer Labor Party revokes its endorsement of Omar Fateh. Jerome Powell signals that rate cuts may be coming as Trump's tariffs slow growth and inflate prices. Elon Musk and X settle with their former workers over stolen severance pay, but his legal woes don't end there. A federal judge says he may be sued over defrauding voters with his $1 million a day election giveaway. And lastly, new Eric Adams bribery scandal drops, and it's somehow funnier than the last. One of his advisors tried to bribe a reporter by putting cash in a bag of potato chips. I'm not joking. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is Casual Friday. Sorry a bit for the late start today. We had some technical stuff that we're working on, so pandemic anxiety is a little anxious that the Rumble stream is not up. You know, one of the our millions of viewers on Rumble.
Yeah, well, probably the only one really is pandemic anxiety,
holding it down.
Who is I'm afraid to say not sincere. That's a joke name, but yeah, unfortunately, our usual relay for sending this to all the different apps is not working today for some reason. So probably no Rumble, but hopefully the app is working if you refresh the app. And we're up on Twitch as well.
Nassau County spokesperson writes in, "Screw DFL, donate to Omar Fateh." I mean, we'll get into this more in the fun half, but Matt, just your reaction to this incredibly undemocratic action.
Yeah, so I mean, what happened basically is what happens at caucuses, which is the most devoted folks can sometimes get a result that maybe the lax establishment doesn't like. And Jeremy Fry, there was, from what I can gather, like not the smoothest convention ran, and he and his supporters decided, oh, let's just pull out of this. And Fateh was able to secure, after they did that, secure the nomination. And immediately, Jacob Fry was basically doing stop the steal type of that didn't count sort of thing, because he's got a lot of money. And also there's a conservative streak in the DFL that is afraid to have frankly a Somali socialist as a figurehead, and it's indicative of the DFL, supposedly one of the better parties, right? And we talked about a lot of the things that have been passed in a very slim legislature there, but Fateh is somebody who was literally put on the backs of Uber and Lyft drivers for securing a minimum wage for them, that both Fry and Walz opposed, the establishment in Minnesota. And exactly. Walz indeed endorsed Fry a couple weeks ago. So, but I don't think this is over. I think it shows a lot of weakness in Fry that it's gone this far. So, like, this is a bad day for Fateh, but they're kind of playing from behind when you're saying, actually, we didn't mean that endorsement. Let's make our whole party look basically incompetent. Like, if you can't trust them with your own convention, how can you trust them with the state of Minnesota or a city like Minneapolis? But
I mean, it's more than just Fateh. What is so infuriating is seeing this complete dismissal of all of these East African folks who were activated by the political process and had more enthusiasm on their side. And is the Democratic Party a big tent for immigrants and for people of color? It appears to be not the case with the Minnesota DFL right now.
Certain types of people can be in the tent. They just can't be leading the circus.
Exactly. Well, on to national news here. The big story that broke this morning is that Donald Trump is escalating his efforts to attack and intimidate his critics. This is perhaps the most loathsome critic of his that I could come up with, and there's a real cast of characters that we could choose from here. John Bolton, he served in Donald Trump's first term. Since then, he has been selling books based on his criticisms of Donald Trump, which largely center around the fact that he thinks Trump should be more hawkish, basically in every single area, that we should be going to war with Iran. When Trump got back into office at the beginning of the year, he revoked John Bolton's security clearance, as well as like others, Joe Biden's, Hunter Biden's, in a kind of sweeping effort to be as petty as possible. But it's an important story, not because I can defend literally anything John Bolton has ever done, but because this is potentially a trial balloon for him to continue to go after his critics in other areas. This is Trump this morning being asked about the FBI raid on John Bolton's home and office in Maryland this morning. And you'll hear this excuse literally from Donald Trump probably 3 to 4 times a week. This might be the least believable attempt at the I know nothing about it.
So I'll fire her if she doesn't resign.
Mr. President,
Pause it. That is in reference to the latest Fed official that he's bullying. Another story that's going to just go completely under the radar because of all the insanity today.
So I'll fire her if she doesn't resign.
Okay.
Mr. President, have you been briefed on the FBI raid of John Bolton's home?
No, I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. He's a real sort of a lowlife. When I hired him, he served a good purpose because, as you know, he was one of the people that forced Bush to do the ridiculous bombings in the Middle East. Bolton, he wants to always kill people, and he's very bad at what he does. But he worked out great for me because every time he doesn't talk, he's like a very quiet person, except on television. If he could say something bad about Trump, he'll always do that. But he really doesn't talk. He's quiet. And I'd walk into a room with him with a foreign country, and the foreign country would give me everything because they said, oh no, they're going to get blown up because John Bolton's there. He's not a smart guy, but he could be a very unpatriotic guy. I mean, we're going to find out. I know nothing about it. I just saw it this morning. They did a raid.
Do you expect the DOJ to brief you on this?
Yeah, they'll brief me, probably today sometime.
And the foreign minister.
I tell Pam and I tell the group, I don't want to know, but just you have to do what you have to do. I don't want to know about it. It's not necessary. I could know about it. I could be the one starting it. I'm actually the chief law enforcement officer, but I feel that it's better this way.
Okay. Oh, he's above it. He would never be.
It's the appearance of impropriety.
Yeah, come on, the norms, media. His most legendary. This is the first time you're ever telling me about this. Was the Ruth Bader Ginsburg one when she died, which I think might have been his only authentic attempt at that. I'm not sure, but we don't need to psychoanalyze this guy for too much longer. You are not the chief law enforcement officer in the country. I don't really know
I'm
how
the sheriff
else to
of
say
America.
It is troubling that he sees basically his function as the head of the military, that is the president's basically formal role, constitutionally allocated role, with being the chief domestic law enforcement officer in this country.
The commander-in-chief of law enforcement.
He's like a little, boy in a town that wants to be a cop growing up. He needs to get some experience first. He, as the new chief law enforcement officer in the United States, this is him. I guess this was yesterday or this morning?
Yes, this was yesterday.
He called into the Todd Starnes show to talk about how he's going to get some experience with law enforcement.
What's this image, by the way? Is that
AI. Yeah.
And
This is embarrassing.
To me, this looks like someone making fun of him, and I had to double check that this is the AI image that Todd Starnes himself put up. But
it looks foolish.
I think he looks strong.
And I'm going to be going out tonight. I'm going to keep it a secret, but I'm going to go. You're the only one that knows. You and your lots of listeners. You have a great show. You have a very successful show, by the way, in case you haven't heard that. But I'm going to be going out tonight, I think, with the police, and with the military, of course. So we're going to do a job. The National Guard is great. They've done a fantastic job.
So he's going to do a little ride along with a cop.
We're going to do a job is another one. If you put a pull string on a Trump doll.
Right. We're going to do a job. Dude, when he said you're the chief law enforcement officer in the country, and right before that, he had said that he just lets Pam Bondi do her thing and that he has a big separation from her. She is by law the top law enforcement officer in the country. She's the U.S. Attorney General. So that's not how that works, buddy. Which one is it? Are you basically using Pam Bondi as a puppet to be the chief law enforcement officer in the country, or is she the chief law enforcement officer in the country?
I'll get back to you in 2 weeks.
Yes. It's a semi-firm deadline. In 2020, Trump tweeted this out about John Bolton. Feels a little relevant today. Bolton broke the law and has been called out and rebuked for so doing. This is attempt at being highfalutin.
I think he wrote that one himself, actually.
Yeah. With a really big price to pay. He likes dropping bombs on people and killing them. Now he will have bombs dropped on him. He was president in that time, saying he was going to drop a bomb on his former national security advisor on, like, domestic soil.
Figurative bombs.
How are you going to pretend you're the dove here, buddy? You're literally doing genocide right now. You are presiding over what the UN just said was the starvation currently of 500,000 people imposed by Israel and the United States. Later in the show, we will play a clip from CBS of another whistleblower from the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has been put together by U.S. consultants. A consulting group, the Boston, I'm forgetting the exact acronym. BCG, which Netanyahu previously worked at, when he grew up in part in the United States. Just a bit of a coincidence. They were involved in setting up this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and they are participating in the slaughter, according to these whistleblowers, of folks waiting for aid, bragging, according to the whistleblower, about how many animals and human beings they could kill, shooting at them from a long way away. This is Donald Trump's foreign policy. He's allowing for the annexation of the West Bank. Just because you're not making the exact decision to bomb Gaza and you have some plausible deniability because our vassal state does it for you, doesn't make you anti-war. And also, dude, when he got into power the first time, the way he got to show off how pretend he was big down there, basically, was going and dropping the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan to show that he was a big dog, basically. You are not anti-war.
I mean, how did Bolton feel about the strikes against Iran earlier this year?
I'm sure he was. The true part is that he wished that we were more directly involved. But Donald Trump is too transactional, honestly. I think for Bolton's ideology of like deep Islamophobia and bloodlust to win out at the end. It's more just like if Trump can get rich off of it, he'll agree to it. But either way, the precedent this sets is concerning.
To be fair, Bolton thought we should have done more, and
of course
in Iran. But yeah,
he was the driving force behind wanting, after Bush, we had already invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. He wanted to open it up in his second term to a war with Iran. That's how insane this guy is. So no love lost here, but of course, who's next?
He also, when asked about January 6th, he said it wasn't a coup because he knew as a person who's partaken in a lot of coups.
Right, I loved that. quiet part out loud. It was like the right-wing neocon version of the Chris Murphy tweet about our Venezuela coup. In a moment, we will be speaking to Derek Davison and Eleanor Janega. But we just did our ad read. But first, we'll take a break.
No ads? Okay.
No ads,
Let's get right to
except
the
for
break.
Sunset Lake. So, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by our guests. We are back, and we are joined now by Derek Davison and Eleanor Janega. Derek is the writer and publisher of the Foreign Exchanges newsletter and co-host of the American Prestige podcast. Eleanor is a medieval historian and author of The Once and Future Sex, Going Medieval on Women's Roles in Society. Derek and Eleanor, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Of course, Derek. We've had you on before. I heard you guys on Chapo a little bit. People can check out that episode. But exciting stuff. Tell us a little bit about your new Crusades podcast. It's a little relevant, as you mentioned in the show, because our Secretary of Defense has a bunch of Crusades tattoos.
Yeah, he's going around with a little body modification there. Yeah.
What is old is new again. Tell us a bit about it.
It's one of these things where I really wish talking about the Crusades wasn't particularly relevant, but unfortunately, people don't study the medieval period, and I get it. It's a long time ago. It's incredibly complicated. You would have to learn things, and we're pretty busy at the moment. But the trouble with that is that it lets people like our Secretary of Defense tell a story about how like nice knights on horses went and did a big religious war, and it was really cool. And these guys are actually a bunch of like losers who like basically somehow like stumble over their horses and land on their feet in Jerusalem somehow. We're not exactly sure how we are. It's just like the element of surprise. And, a couple hundred years later, people are telling really stupid stories about this. And, it's dangerous stuff. And unfortunately, if we don't talk about medieval history on the left, then it just lets the right tell weird mythologies and put themselves at the center of it. And so, I'm here to ruin their day, which is fun.
So you're a Christo-Fascist mythbuster, would you say? Is that a good way to describe your role?
I'm attempting to be anyway. Yeah, and it's not even that hard to bust the myths. That's the thing about it. It's really sad. You just have to like read one book and you're ahead of them. But nobody does, which is fair enough, right?
And
So
I do want to say, like, if people would like to listen to the series and just get the medieval stuff and listen to us talk about the Crusades, we don't really get into Pete Hegseth's tattoos until the last episode. So
okay.
there's a lot of nice medieval history content if that's what you're interested in.
I'll skip to the end then a little bit just to make sure we bring your great work into like our current political context, because we're wrapping up the news of the week this week on Friday, and it just feels like I never, like, when Monday hits, I forget what the big headlines were, and yet they're always kind of all the same. Gaza genocide, far-right Christian nationalists, the alligator Alcatraz, this mass deportation. Like, I mean, really, really big picture view. How, as people who are, historians and work in analyzing our history, how do you place this moment that we're experiencing right now in history? It's a bit of a big question.
I think that it's kind of a logical conclusion to a particularized form of history that they have really been attempting to push forward, and we're seeing this right now, for example, in the backlashes against museums in Washington, D.C., attempting to tell sanitized versions of history that don't involve anything that might make you sad. You don't have to go very far between the Gazan genocide and Christo-nationalism. It's the same thing. They're two parts of the same coin. And indeed, they hinge on these mythologies that people tell about the Crusades. And I think it's a little bit odd because, obviously I'm obsessed with the medieval period. I study it all the time, but I've never really looked at history, saying, oh, this is going to tell me a story that's going to make me feel good about myself. Like history is where I see myself reflected. But you do see people do that, and that's why you get pushes to putting forward these things. And it's also why you get alligator Alcatraz, right? Because anyone who becomes inconvenient to that narrative has to be literally removed from your society because it is troubling a story you have been violently invested in telling for quite some time.
Well, Derek, can you expand on that too? Because it's amazing that these right-wing white male conservatives do not think that their perspective is accurately reflected in history or kind enough to them. It's absolutely incredible victimhood and so pathetic when you really say it that way.
Well, it's essential to the narrative, right? Like, you have to be simultaneously an alpha male and victimized by literally everyone else in society.
That's Trump. That's fascism,
bemoaning.
Right?
Yeah, that's absolutely Trump. I mean, he's, he projects this weird image of masculinity, which I don't see, but a lot of people apparently do. But at the same time, like, his whole animating ethos is one grievance after another. It's like Graydon. What the hell's that guy's name? Graydon Carter and his Oscar party, or it's Obama was mean to me at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, or they're stealing the election. I mean, it's always just somebody's putting upon poor helpless Donald, and that's how he rallies people. I mean, they have to go together, or else the whole messaging falls apart.
And it feels very much like a continuation of the lost cause. Like, the efforts to rewrite history here are very, there are many historical parallels, but that's the one that sticks out the most to me, where, okay, his war against the Smithsonian seems incredibly petty because it is, and precious, but it's indicative of broader policies of the administration. Either of you guys can take this, but like, the Supreme Court now, just this morning, 5-4, Amy Coney Barrett sided with the right wingers, and then John Roberts sided with the liberals, so it was 5-4, but it still overturned this lower court decision that basically allowed for the revocation of $800 million in NIH research that would focus on basically non-white people, LGBTQ people, folks who were, and I'm not sure if it's women, but these are groups that were not studied medically, for example, for a long period of time, and it's why like women's healthcare is so far behind men. This has implications for like the future of intellectual exploration and research and medical advancement and stuff over the next 4 years. That's going to be very difficult to recoup as China laps us technologically.
It's
Either
a
of you guys
really
can take it. Yeah.
It's a very interesting ceding of ground in terms of saying that we're just not going to be at the hegemon in terms of what academic thought is, which is really interesting to me. But it also makes perfect sense within their worldview, because what they're attempting to do here is isolate a certain group of people who are worthy of receiving healthcare, who are white men, and everyone else, you just don't need it. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about that, right? And I think from the perspective of women, it's interesting because it's also sort of like, oh, well, why do you need it? You know, the only time that women's bodies kind of come up medically historically is when we're giving birth, and then it's like, oh, well, oh, now it's important. She might have a boy. And then that, like, her existence would be valid, and that'd be interesting. And of course, we see this play out much, much worse in terms of how health incomes work for minority groups. You know, it's still incredibly prevalent, for example, among medical professionals to think that Black people, for example, feel pain less acutely.
Yeah.
And of course, there's going to be a vested interest in making sure that science doesn't enter the record. Quite what they see happening or how that's going to pan out in terms of us against China, I think that basically they're just really stupid, and they don't care. They're willing to cede this ground because they don't see that as a necessary playing field or anywhere that you need to be looking, and they're fine. You know, oh well, if Chinese people want to look into how medicine works for Chinese people, that's fine. I guess is what they're purporting to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a conscious, I think, effort to not effort, but a willingness to give ground on things that they just don't find important, and it is to some extent. I mean, you know, they did the same thing with USAID when they cut the foreign aid budget to the bone. It gives ground away to China, but it's ground that they don't see as particularly important. These guys are not. They're not hegemonically minded. I would say they're not, you know, reducing in a conscious way, trying to lessen the U.S. presence in the world or cede ground. They just feel like it's more important for us to have a $1.2 trillion military and project power that way, and the rest of the world and bully, you know, use that power. The economic power and the military power to kind of bully the rest of the world to fall in line, as opposed to the so-called, you know, soft power kinds of things. They're more willing to give that up.
Yeah, and it's also this enclosure around like existing extractive industries too is something that I think is interesting to like explore, where look, I'm not going to be a defender of unfettered free trade, but the idea that we should be kind of like eschewing technological advancements in things like green energy in order to just section everybody off and reify existing industries. It's like this. I mean, Trump's age doesn't get in the headlines enough, but he's talking about death all the time. And it feels like the last gasp of a group of really, really greedy capitalist old guys that want to just get theirs while they can. And I'm sorry, there's somebody doing construction outside, so that's why you
you
might
guys,
hear this noise.
you're expanding. Majority Report is expanding, folks.
It's driving me
building the
insane.
studio as we're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's a certain, and I think a lot of this comes from Trump, because the people around him tend to be younger, and I suspect know better. But Trump drives a lot of the tariff stuff and the really let's bring back the factories, and you know, certain people around him, like, you know, Howard Lutwick and the really old guard types. Do have this vision of like America as, you know, the industrial power of the world, but it's a fantasy, and it's not. They're not even pursuing it in a serious way. Like you can't just throw up 50% tariffs on India or 30% tariffs on China, or even the 140% or whatever we were at with China before the deal, and say, okay, magically now we're going to start manufacturing, electronics, or we're going to start manufacturing like basic shit in the United States. It doesn't work that way. The entire economy's been geared toward financialization, toward banking and that sector for so long. You would have to have a fundamental reconstruction of the U.S. economy at this point that they're clearly not interested in pursuing, because there's a lot of bankers in Trump's, who are in Trump's ear too. They don't want to see that happen. So it's not even a serious push. It's just sort of this like half-hearted, look, we're bringing back the factories. They're really not, but it's sort of a sop, I think, to that mindset.
Go ahead, Eleanor.
I think it's quite interesting, because I think you're really onto something here, Emma, where for a certain number of them, I think it's about the fact that this is not going to matter to me. Right? I'm going to be dead by the time the climate change really kicks in.
Yep.
By the time any of this really has any meaning, and screw my grandkids. I'm going to make this money now. And I think it is also a little bit, this is kind of the equivalent of your granddad asking you how you rotate PDF, right? It's like, it's too difficult to kind of learn a new economic system. So we're just not going to do that. I don't feel like doing it. I know this makes money right now in the short term. And so this is going to be a problem for everybody else down the line. And, fundamentally, just saying things like that can do two things. It doesn't mean that you have to undo all the snarls of neoliberalism that have brought us to this point. I mean, everyone can agree that probably it would have been good if we had some manufacturing going on, but it doesn't also ask that you do anything. And I think that a lot of the governments that see themselves as, the global leaders are really in that position right now, where simultaneously they're just kind of like hoping that they can say something, and then the line's going to go back up and everything's going to be fine and you don't need to worry about it, but without the major investment that would be required for infrastructure to make any of that work.
Right. I mean, the financialization of it just sticks out to me so much too, when you see how much money is being wasted on basically our AI investments versus the dollar-to-dollar comparisons for China, which is lapping us technologically, but it's not, increasing the stock value. So that level of efficiency doesn't exist in our economy because it's so heavily financialized and everyone needs a cut.
I mean, have any of you guys bought the AI mattress cover? I think that was the last one I saw, the AI mattress pad.
No, haven't heard about that.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're not sleep maxing then, I guess.
I guess not.
Wait, can AI make your bed now?
Well, AI cools your bed, but it's like a subscription service.
Yeah, you have to get a subscription so it monitors how you sleep and adjusts. I don't know if it's just temperature. What I was thinking about when I saw the post about it, I was laughing, and then I found out it runs on a subscription service. So if you forget to change the expiration date on your credit card, I don't know if it sends you a little electric shock to wake you up in the middle of the night to remind you to do that or what, but I'm excited for the possibility.
Do you know,
I might be a sponsor, so easy.
I think that they should. Anyone who spends money on this should just be shocked as a matter of principle. So I'm actually I'm on board with big tech on this one. It's fine.
There you go. Excellent.
I got you. All right. Yeah. Well, it's the people that also get chips or volunteering to get chips in their brains from Elon Musk. It's kind of like, all right, I'm not going to be one of those right wingers that are like Darwinism at work, but in those select circumstances, you kind of know what you're in for.
You've opted
right?
into that, yeah.
Yeah, and you're also probably fairly rich, or I don't know, way too far down the rabbit hole anyway that a chip's not gonna in your brain's not gonna do much. But let's kind of go towards the foreign policy piece of this, obviously, because I'm a subscriber to your newsletter, Derek. It's really essential. Keeps me informed about all of what's happening in the world, so people can go to American Prestige and check it out. foreign exchanges, but also listen to American
Well, both,
Prestige.
but, yeah.
Both. Yeah, I both listen, but I always mix up which one's American Prestige and which one's foreign exchanges.
I do that. Like, we record interviews, and I start the interview with like, "Welcome to Foreign Exchanges," and it's really American. Like,
right.
I do it, so I can only imagine. Yeah.
But like, especially in this incredibly, turbulent time of wars across the globe, and when, frankly, the United States and Western press broadly is so deeply biased towards the state of Israel, and also very supportive of the United States continuing to support Ukraine, it's difficult to kind of get sometimes information that you feel is a little bit more accurate, and looking at our involvement in these military conflicts objectively. The Gaza genocide is, of course, as we know, one of the worst crimes against worst crimes in the history of humanity, and it's currently ongoing, and we're participating in it right now. I would love to get your guys' reaction to this report from CBS News that came out last night. And there's another Gaza humanitarian foundation whistleblower. Again, this is the mercenary group funded by the United States that has been participating in these aid massacres at sites in Gaza. And we had the Green Beret, Aguilar, come out and speak about the atrocities there. His quote to MSNBC a few weeks ago still rings in my mind, where he says, when we finally open up the Gaza Strip, we're going to see essentially atrocities like humanity has never seen, and the world will have no excuse, because we now know this morning it came out that at least 500,000 Palestinians are currently in the process of starving to death. We know that the death toll is wildly undercounted by probably hundreds of thousands, and this is a full-blown Holocaust. This testimony from this anonymous whistleblower is disturbing, so I want to give people a heads up on that front, but we'll play around 3 minutes of this and would love your guys' reaction.
According to the UN, hundreds of Palestinians have been shot and killed by Israel Defense Forces and foreign military contractors at or near GHF aid sites. We spoke to a new eyewitness who concurs. He told us it's not only the IDF shooting, but also personnel hired through American subcontractors to secure GHF sites.
I thought I was going there to help people.
When this man was hired by an American logistics company to drive aid trucks in Israel, he says he had no idea it meant he'd be working with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation inside Gaza. He asked us to conceal his identity, dub over his voice, and change his name because he fears reprisals. We will call him Mike. He secretly recorded several videos, including this one. What you are hearing, he says, is the sound of gunfire from brightly lit GHF sites fired at Palestinians seeking aid.
It took me 2 or 3 days to realize that they were actually shooting at people. They weren't shooting at combatants.
So, did you think these were warning shots?
No, it's indiscriminate.
And who was doing the shooting?
The IDF. And the American security personnel. They've got positions on each corner of the sites, and they would often shoot at exactly the same time as the Israeli soldiers.
We do not see who is shooting on the videos Mike gave us, but he said there was not a single occasion he observed when there was no shooting, and he was at the sites on average 5 days a week for several weeks. CBS News has seen his work schedule, and metadata from his cell phone confirms the dates and times he was in Gaza. CBS News has been reporting on the almost daily shootings and deaths at or near GHF sites since GHF began operating its sites at the end of May. Palestinians would gather near the sites hours before they opened to be the first to grab food.
I was breathing quite heavily because I'd never seen a crowd of people behave with such intensity and such desperation.
What's the worst thing you experienced?
I was brought outside the perimeter and I was tasked with cleaning up the remains of animals and some humans. What had happened is that there had been so much shooting that human remains had been left there, and the smell got quite bad. So the security contractors had complained and the IDF said it wasn't their business. So I was tasked with cleaning it, but I wasn't warned what it was.
And you were told to clean up everything there and do what?
Just put it in the back of a truck, which took everything away. I struggle to talk about it. I even feel a bit clammy, and I can feel my chest beating harder. I just shut down, really.
Over 1,800 Palestinians.
That was really the bulk of his testimony there, and the fact that he was able to smuggle those videos out of Gaza is important. You know, we know that Israel is currently funding basically gangs that are stealing aid from Palestinians, where they then blame it on Hamas to create, you know, further manufacture more consent for the genocide. Just
Right.
your overall takeaway on that testimony and what the impact is, Derek. I'll start with you.
I mean, the GHF scheme, I have to say, I mean, I didn't, when it was announced, didn't realize it was going to just be openly firing on people and killing them. That surprised me, but it was always premised on the idea that you are committing or planning to commit crimes against humanity, are committing and are planning to commit. The whole idea behind this notion that you're going to change the distribution of aid so it stops coming to where people are and you force people to go to it is about displacement. It's about getting people moving so that when you say, okay, now that you're used to coming, 25 kilometers or whatever it is to get to an aid site, now we'd like you all to go into this one confined area, which they've been setting up in Rafah, or what's left of Rafah, the so-called humanitarian camp. I don't even remember the euphemism that they use. It's a concentration camp. Yes.
Yeah.
For the population. Once you get people moving a little bit, then it's easier to get them moving longer distances, and then you get them moving permanently and relocating, and then they're in a place where they can be controlled, where their movements are prohibited. And coincidentally, Rafah is a very short trip out of Gaza altogether. All they have to do is be sent across the border to Egypt, and then from there, who knows. So it was always about, I think, facilitating the mass ethnic cleansing of Gaza, per what Donald Trump talked about earlier this year with Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that opened the floodgates or opened the minds of Netanyahu and some of the people in his cabinet to the possibilities of what could be achieved here that maybe they were not ready to consider yet, or that they wouldn't have considered prior to that. So it was always going to be an atrocity, but it's been shocking to see the extent to which they're not even waiting for that. They're just kettling people and opening fire on them. They call this crowd control, but they don't give anybody the tools. The IDF doesn't have actual riot or crowd control tools. The contractors certainly don't. So they wind up shooting at people. I mean, just openly shooting at people. And I don't, you can still, I guess, try to justify that. And they've done it. They've said, they're really shooting at looters or people who are behaving in an unruly way, or, approaching the IDF in a suspicious way. It's all, it's all bullshit. It's just about inflicting more punishment on this population, which, as you alluded to earlier, we now know has been designated in Gaza City is in the most man-made famine I think you can possibly imagine, just completely manufactured by the Israeli government.
Right. I mean, even the word famine doesn't accurately describe what is being done here, in the same way a war doesn't describe what is accurately describe what is being done here. I feel like we have all of this very clinical language about the genocide, that just because bombs and highly militarized vehicles and tanks and men with guns are involved, where this is the equivalent of gas chambers, is just being done, with bombs or with forced starvation. There's so much that of really deeply embedded propaganda that I think removes people from the reality of it. I mean, Eleanor, you've of course researched mythologies and the religious elements behind the stories we tell ourselves here. But of course, this is just American imperialism but putting that kind of dressing on it because it appeals to a certain Christo-nationalist thrust within our society.
Completely. And I mean, I think you've really hit on something here, Emma, which is the terminologies that get used in order to sanitize this. So we get all of these new ways of talking about it consistently that are meant to keep us a little bit at arm's length from the horrors. And, you know, even if you're someone like myself who has long been incredibly critical of Israel's treatment of the Palestinians and who has seen this for what it is from the get-go, which is an attempt to ethnically cleanse Gaza, it's still horrifying. When you hear new things from whistleblowers, because it's getting that information that really kind of brings it home to people. And, you know, those of us who have been looking into this for years upon years know what's happening, but it's those little bits of information that really make you understand viscerally what's happening. So we get these technicalities, right? You get these particular ways they'll say, oh, well, it's not technically a genocide because to be a genocide, it needs to be this, that, or the other thing, which is also incorrect. You know, every historian, we love to define our terms, and this meets any definition of genocide going. Yeah. And what it comes down to is that Gazans are not seen by the great majority in the global north as legitimate people. And it's just the same as kind of crusading mentality. You can just go over there, you can clean anybody out that you want to, because there's a rightful owner of that place, and it's the correct religion that you want to see. And from an American imperialist perspective, something that I think isn't talked about enough is that a lot of the people who are quite interested in ethnically cleansing Gaza are interested in propping up the Israeli state because they have Christian eschatological reasons for wanting there to be a Jewish state there.
Can you explain those reasons? We've talked about it over and over again, but it's so dark that I think it could be. I could use your more historical perspective on it.
It's so anti-Semitic, so just strap in. It's really bad. It's not good news. But the idea is that during the apocalypse, at the end of the world, Antichrist is going to come back, and what Antichrist is going to do is he is going to set himself up in Jerusalem, and he's going to rebuild the temple there. And once he rebuilds the temple, he's going to have all of the Jewish people there worship him as the actual Christ. He will then attempt to ascend into heaven to prove that he is Christ after having a battle with Enoch and Elias, who show up because they love the extended universe. And then he will be struck down by the spirit of Christ's mouth and die. And then one of two things is going to happen. Either you get a 10,000-year reign of peace on earth where the remaining Jewish people convert to Christianity. Nice and anti-Semitic, or you go straight to the rest of the apocalypse. The seas will boil, the mountains will crumble, the stars will fall from the sky. But this is supposed to be a good story because at the end of it, Christians then get to go to heaven, and you get on with the rest of eternity, where the bad are eternally punished and Christians get their just desserts. And I don't think that people kind of realize that this is the end story of Christianity. Christianity it's a linear religion. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there is an end, and the end is with the apocalypse. And this anti-Semitism is baked specifically into it. And it's really big, specifically in a lot of American circles. And this is what they're getting at when they prop up the state of Israel. And I think that, Benjamin Netanyahu knows that, and he just doesn't particularly care because he gets what he wants out of it, so that's fine. But there is a not small group of Christo-nationalists, and I would wager, for example, that our Secretary of Defense is one of them, who sees this as a good thing. And
Mike Huckabee, our ambassador to Israel, sees it as a good thing. Many
Absolutely.
Republican Christian members of Congress, like Christian Zionists in our government, outnumber Jewish Zionists, and this is the ideology that you are describing.
Exactly. And you see this across, the medieval period. This crops up all of the time. And it's just that it's shifted a bit in who believes it now and who wants to kind of go forward with it, because I think the Catholics kind of tried it on, with the Crusade, so they're like, okay, never mind, starting over, but you see a lot more of it with evangelicals and people like that now. And I know that it's a bummer, and I know that it's complex because it's easy to kind of have these knee-jerk reactions to who is doing this and why. But you'll see time and time again that Christian Zionists are a lot more prevalent than is comfortable. And they're the ones who will immediately, if you say something like, oh, I'm not really sure about all the genocide happening in Palestine, they'll say, oh, what, are you an anti-Semite? And the basis of the worldview is profoundly anti-Semitic, and it's absolutely maddening. But if you don't know about it, then it's very difficult to argue against it. But even if you do argue against it, it doesn't matter, because they have this as a deeply held spiritual belief. And the hypocrisy doesn't matter with these people. None of this matters. They don't care. The violence is the point. And that is what is really difficult to get your head around if you're a right-thinking person.
Well, they see the violence as evidence of their ideology coming to fruition. Go ahead, Derek.
Right. I think, to bring this back to a little bit where we started, questions of historical memory, one of the things that's interesting to me, leaving aside the Christian Zionists in the end times, is the notion that, as the phrase goes, one day everyone will always have been against this, and I think that's very true of Gaza, and we're already seeing it start to happen. But I do think about, like, when are we going to, at what point is everybody going to look back on this and say, well, I oppose that, even though they didn't do anything about it, or they actively cheered it on, or, whatever role they may have played. We are going to get to a point with that. And like I said, I think we're seeing people already start doing that. And it's morbidly, it's aggravating, but it's also morbidly interesting to watch that happen in real time, to watch that narrative take hold of, like, oh, well, we always knew this was bad, or definitely people are starving now, but they I don't think they were 3 months ago, as though there's some way to separate what's happening now from what they were doing 3 months ago. But it's all these processes of how people internalize their own participation, or their own feelings about what's happening, and create a comforting narrative for themselves, I think, is an interesting one, and we're seeing it happen.
Yeah, and another element that's interesting to me, obviously in ways that are deeply disturbing, is we got this news today that a federal judge has basically ordered the halting of further construction of the concentration camp in Florida, Alligator Alcatraz, as the Trump administration is calling it. And the judge sided with an indigenous rights group suing on environmental grounds, and giving it guidelines that effectively definitely prevents it from expanding, but also likely might make the facility shut down, which is good news. But so many of the tactics, first, they borrowed from CCOT, and they brought it onto U.S. soil. When you hear the deprivation, the lights on all the time, the squalid conditions,
the glitzy media they take of it,
the caging of folks in literal cages down, and bragging about the conditions being so poor, and it's outright torture, basically. And it's a continuation of the rollback of civil liberties and protections, to me, from the Iraq War on. Like, when we talk about how fascism is either imperialism turning inward or colonialism turning inward, like, we are now using those tactics that many of the critics of the Bush administration's war on terror that were using on folks that they accused of terrorism, denying them due process. This is now being used against people on U.S. soil, against, for my money, Americans. I don't care if you aren't like a full citizen yet. These are tactics being used on Americans. And that is a dynamic where I think, like, we can talk about foreign policy not as something as separate, but as as just state power that can be used and molded eventually, with the right guy in power, for the right wing at least, against people here domestically and eventually, of course, critics of the administration.
Right. I mean, they've embraced this. Sorry, they've embraced this not just in the camp in Florida. I mean, they're now trafficking people. I mean, we can argue about what deportation is, but deportation to me is you send somebody back to their country of origin for whatever reason. They're trafficking people now. They've got deals in place with El Salvador, with South Sudan, with Uganda, I think most recently, to send people to countries that they're not from. They have nothing to do with. They have no family, nothing there at all. They've probably never been there. And that's trafficking. That's not deportation. That's human trafficking. And to think, if you think that this is only going to be limited to, the undesirables, whatever you define that as, they've already breached that wall. I mean, the initially when they came in, these kind of maximal penalties for undocumented migrants, that it was supposed to be, well, these are just people who have committed like heinous crimes. We're going to send them into, we send them to the prison in El Salvador. We're going to send them here. We're going to send them there. And that's already been violent. I mean, they're sending anybody. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's no restriction on that. If you think that this is going to stop with, undocumented migrants, it's not. They're going to go after naturalized citizenship. They're going to start to go after U.S. citizens at some point, because there's already been in the negotiations over, for example, the CCOP prison in El Salvador, there was already talk of maybe we could send violent U.S. offenders, U.S. citizen offenders to this prison. Why, I don't know, because prison construction is the only thing that the United States does well anymore. But but that's the rationale, is we're just gonna, we're gonna eventually get to the point where we can just decide, and they've done it to a certain extent with the Muhammad Khalil case and others. These people are just not, they're not on board with our project. Like they're not with us. So let's get rid of them. Let's ship them off. It's a very steep, slippery slope to as you say, Emma, just some really awful places.
Eleanor, the floor is yours if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really good point, though, to talk about how it was the horrors of the Bush administration that brought this upon us, because I think that's something that really gets lost in the wash. What with the rehabilitation that we've seen of George W. Bush lately, that's just a sweet old guy that paints. And, we were treated as though we were, I left the States during the Bush period because your girl is a historian and saw which way the wind was blowing and said, no, thank you. Of course, I'm stuck in the UK. It's not better. It's not better. It's one of these things where it was just sort of obvious. I think if you are someone who spends all of their time thinking about history, where this was going, because this is where it goes. And, it's not particularly different at all from what we saw happening in Europe in the ramp up to World War II. Even now, the capitulations that we're trying to see from varying governments, the same sort of things that we're seeing, even like with the Democrats being like, oh, well, maybe if we just act a little bit, what if we were a little bit transphobic? What if we committed to also building a wall? What if we did all of these things? And then that's going to prevent this slide into fascism, as opposed to just saying, oh, yeah, no, the fascists are actually kind of onto something. And I mean, we're seeing it here in the UK. Our government is doing exactly the same thing, but faster. And so we are really living in the outcome of treating individuals like George Bush as though this is acceptable. That any of this was ever fine, because all that does is normalize the poor treatment of people. And so, yeah, like, surprise, the violence has come down to the imperial core, which is what happens. Yeah. And it's exhausting to be a historian, because you just see it happen over and over again, and no one ever wants to talk about it. It's like, yeah, but this time it's going to be different because we have computers, so no one's going to fall for it.
I think that's an important point, because it's not just the abuses that began under the Bush administration. It's the failure to prosecute any of them in the period that followed, when we were under an administration that knew better. I know they knew better, but they decided that it would be too politically costly to do anything about it. And that's how you get to the point where George W. Bush is handing out candy at a funeral like a nice old man, and everybody says, "Oh, aren't these guys nice?" And they're all recycled back into power, and there's no there's no consequence, there's no accountability. It's a conscious choice not to do that. And same thing with the Biden administration. The notion that Donald Trump was, after everything that happened in that first term, was able to run for president again is a failure. It's a failure to be to take some kind of action to punish wrongdoing and to say, well, once you're at that level, we really don't want to have anything to do with that. We're just going to kind of say, okay, that's over. Let's move on. And of course, we don't move on because it always comes back unless you prevent it from coming back.
Right. Turning the page as we did, it had major consequences. Lastly here, we have some IMs from Set the Lit PhD, who is describing himself as a history nerd and wanted to make sure I got this in before we let you go. Seth says, I wonder about these whistleblowers in the context of the myth of the disillusioned crusader, if such a trope was a historical reality or a later fabrication. Also interesting in the context of medieval obsession with the Levant. The West has always had this weird fixation on this region. Eleanor, if you don't mind responding to that.
Oh God, no! I'll respond to that all day long. So, I think that in the medieval context, the disillusioned crusader is usually one who it didn't get what he wanted out of it, and we tend to see the disillusioned crusader come up more in the later crusades, not the first one, but the second one, which was a disaster. They were take your pick. It's all a disaster.
They were all
like
the first one's the only one that really worked. So
and even then, half of everyone just died in a ditch with having dysentery. So it's kind of a way that we relate to crusaders. So when they're kind of complaining that what they expected was going to happen didn't happen, we kind of in a postmodern way layer on our own understanding of this as saying, oh yeah, and then they kind of got wise to the humanist project and they knew better after that. And I think that's a really human urge to kind of see our own society in the past. But fundamentally, medieval people don't share these kind of same ideals. And a lot of the time they're just kind of complaining that their project didn't work. Although a lot of these white boys do go home and they kind of actually like Muslim people now. That is something that we see. They take home a lot of food. They think that's awesome. It's a bit of a myth that there weren't already spices and stuff in Europe, but it gets worked up way more. Get a lot of white boys who are the equivalent of weebs for the Middle East, and women as well. So you do see that. So there is a cross-cultural thing, and depending on what crusade you're talking about, sometimes they really like it. Everybody loves Saladin. For whatever reason. So, you could be a disillusioned crusader, but it's usually more about, oh, I'm sad that the mission failed, and a little less like, oh, wait a minute, it turns out that, all of these Norman guys just wanted their own castle. You get less of that on record anyway, because anyone who would think like that isn't going to be given the power or ability to write that story down and then keep it, because it just goes against the official narrative of what people want to say.
Well said. Appreciate it so much. Everybody check out your guys' new podcast. I don't have the name written down. I'm so sorry.
Welcome to the Crusades. You can find it at welcometothecrusades.com. All one word, welcometothecrusades.com.
Okay,
that's where you can find that. And our both of our shows, if you go to either of our shows websites, you can find links to it there too.
We'll put a link down below in the description. Really, I know what I'll be doing this weekend. Thanks so much, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
All right, with that, folks, we'll wrap up the free part of this program, head into the fun part of the program. We'll take your calls and read your IMs. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, we're going to have a Sunday show for y'all. This weekend, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get that, which is our weekly Sunday show. Also, I want to do a call to action here, and I have this ready to go. This is from Jasper Nathaniel. There's this 16-year-old Palestinian American boy and I'll just read what Jasper said here. Urgent action requested to free Mohammed Zahir Ibrahim, a 16-year-old Palestinian American, has been imprisoned in Israel since February. I just spoke to his lawyer. His case has been escalated to a higher court judge. A possible deal is on the table. Mohammed could be freed if he leaves Palestine for 1 year. His parents are fine with this. They can live together with family in Florida. But it's not finalized. Mohammed's lawyer says extra pressure from the U.S. Embassy right now could push his release across the finish line. So please call your local representatives. And I've retweeted this. It's one of the top, most recently things I've retweeted if you want these talking points that Jasper has shared. So this is a good call to action for the week if people want to help get this kid out of Israeli, I mean,
an American.
The conditions that I don't even want to imagine.
Yeah.
What he's going through since February.
That's we'll put a link to that to Jasper's tweet, so you guys can click on it and see what the best talking points are to try to push that over the finish line. All right, quick break, and we'll see you on the other side in the fun half.